All right, so we have a full panel to start with. I'll explain the format briefly. This is what we call a park bench panel, which means that it's a rotating panel. We start with 4 people here. Anna is the judge, which we'll get to what the role of that is. But essentially, we'll start with a question. The panelists get to answer that. Anyone in the audience is allowed to ask any question, but if anyone states an opinion or asks a question in a way that it sounds like an opinion, and that is what Anna is judge of, if it's a true question or an opinion formed as a question.
So if you inadvertently have an opinion, which we hope you will, you basically take the seat of one of the people sitting here, and they sit down in the audience again.
And it's round robin style, so Igor will go out first, and then going down the line, replacing people as you have more opinions.
But once you get off, you can always come back. So you're not off forever. You can totally come back.
And if you're up there, you're free to express any opinion you want.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we have a first opening question, and so if you guys want to grab the mics that are there, just test them, make sure that they're working. Yeah, very nice. So I think the first question that we thought would be relevant to the event is, what is the security of a snark or stark, and is it enough?
Okay, so Starks, based on the security of a collision-resistant hash function, and if we want it to be non-interactive, we need to assume the Fiat-Shamir assumption heuristic as well, and that's it. Except of that, everything is just mathematics. And about snarks, as we all know, there is the trusted setup, and the discrete logarithm problem that if somebody uses a quantum computer, we know that it is breakable.
I would agree with everything like that. But the one problem I have with the way Starks are currently presented is that, well, you said that they were, in the way you've created them right now, in the way you're for scaling, they were 2 to the 80 bits of security, which isn't really enough in a practical setting for applied security. But yeah, other than that, they're pretty good. But Peterson hashing also is not post-quantum secure either, though. So depending on what you're proving, then you can kind of alleviate the quantum security.
You can have a team of academics researching the security of snarks for 10 or 15 years, and they can guarantee you that it is secure under every condition. And then people use them that are not academics, or they haven't spent 10 years, or they do something they think is secure, and they get people to audit it, and it looks secure until somebody finds a bug in it, which inevitably always happens. So I think that the security of snarks and starks is not a problem of is the math sound or is the D-log problem hard. It's more like how often do humans mess up really badly, and are you one of those when you made one of the starks or snarks?
I express my opinion as a podcast listener, so not as a engineer. That's what I learned from podcast listening about both algorithms. So I like that it's post-quantum secure theoretically, and no one knows yet, right? And with Starks, and also I participated in this workshop and where we reviewed the paper, and it's possible to understand with some basic math skills the paper, and there is no toxic waste, so that's great. And what I like most, that anyone can basically participate in the ceremony, right? When you set up Stark. The only concerning thing for me is absence of open source prover. So there is no yet, but community will create one eventually, right? And maybe it will have different speed parameters or like features, but the basic protocol will be open source eventually, right?
Yeah, of course, the protocol has to be open source because nobody can trust a cryptographic proof system if it's not clear. So it's not only the verifier is of course going to be open source. We might publish a reference prover, which maybe not be as efficient as the prover we will be using, but there must be some reference. Not for trust consumption, but for the community. So it is a possibility. And I wanted to say about the security bits, the IT security bits. This is just a parameter, and there is no problem to generate a proof for any security you want, 120, and it will be just a bit bigger, a few more kilobytes, and you'll have better security.
All right, so now I think we open up.
Yeah, let's open up for questions.
Yeah, we
I
open
have the first one.
Oh.
So related to this, I'm curious on I'm relaying this question from someone I talked to outside earlier. Like a snark or a stark is a probabilistic argument. So what is the probability that it's wrong? Like what are the probabilities? And if you have a protocol like Coda that has recursive snarks, what people say is that the security reduces with each recursion. So how much does that reduce the probability in each recursion? When does it become unsafe?
So it's exactly the security, as we just discussed, 80 bits of security, 120 bits of security. If we have 80 bits of security, the probability of a verifier to accept a proof to a false statement is about 2 in minus 80. If it's 120, the probability is 2 in minus 120. And you can tune it to be as low as you want to, paying in the size of the proof.
But does verification scale when you put it into a practical level of security?
Yes, it won't change much. As I said, if you want to move from 80 bits of security to 120, it will add maybe a few kilobytes to the proof, but it is still something logarithmic in the statement size, and it will be very fast.
What about verification speeds?
Just 1 second. I think we might have a question or comment from the audience.
I guess I don't need to go up, but it's.
I think you have to.
That's already you're up.
Okay. But okay.
Okay.
I don't think I have to.
Okay. So, but I don't know who said this, but it's definitely not true. What is true is that it's, there's something in the definition of knowledge sound argument or whatever that you need to build this extractor, and it is true in the security proof that with each recursion the extractor gets bigger and bigger, but this doesn't relate to the soundness, concretely speaking, of the proof system.
All right, I think we can actually open up the floor to new questions. Does anyone else have a question or a comment?
Yeah, I have a comment about the snark thing. So, although I love snark, right now on Ethereum, the security of BN 256 is about 86 bits. So, how secure it is? And why do we concern ourselves with numbers that are above that when the underlying curve is already not secure? We provide more security right now in all the circuit we built than the underlying curve is allowing us to create.
So that's an opinion, and sadly it's directed to you, so you don't really get a chance to answer it. But you can answer first. Okay, you can answer it if you want to, and then you're going to take his place.
Clearly no.
No, you are. You are. It's part of the game. think it was. Yeah, a little bit.
Okay, so again, 80 bits of security. In this case, if the entire network of Ethereum miners want to collude and do something problematic with a Stark proof, they would do it if the verifier is tuned to 80 bits of security. But again, if this is your threat, just have a verifier with higher security, 120 bits of security, for example.
Actually, I wasn't I think my point wasn't addressing to Stark. It was more like it's about snarks.
Okay.
Right now, everyone says.
So then you can come up.
It's also, I don't know if that's exactly. I mean, just to say something about this curve. This is because of this improved Steve algorithm in 2016 or Silver and Bergolescu, and I forget the other person. But I think it's more like some people say it's like 100 to 110 bits. But anyway. Maybe you know different.
Yeah, so actually I'd be interested to hear maybe if you have more information on this 86 number. Maybe there's new developments I'm not aware. But at the time I was at Zcash where we were thinking of switching curve and people were saying, oh, it's just 100 bits of security because of this new number field sieve algorithms. And it's, at least then, it was very conjectural. So they're kind of saying under this number theoretic assumptions that we don't know, that are very hard, like very complicated and very hard to estimate if they're true or not. Under the most optimistic case about these number theoretic objects, these ideals in these number fields, we only need to go over a space of size 2 to the 100 to compute the discrete log or whatever. But then, again, they make this very optimistic assumption, or conservative, right, in terms of security, that really there's a way in linear time to go over this space of size 2 to the 100. But it's a very complicated space. So just as far as I know, there was, in terms of concrete attacks, it wasn't clear that there was something, maybe it still has 128 bits of security, you know.
I think you're up.
To just also point out too, like a big point of this is also just the capabilities, right? Like if we can envision that the idea of an attack now at this point is not, oh, we know it's 100% possible, we have developed an attack that actually breaks the security. It's that at this moment in time, there is now a future in which we can imagine an attack being developed, and therefore is it ethical or okay for us to build an entire ecosystem on top of this what may be weak curve? So that's like the whole point here. So if it is at some point weaker than 2 to the 128 or whatever it says, and now a whole new class of attack is showing this is potentially a problem, suddenly, you know, we should probably start thinking about where are we going to move in the future, and should we just do something different and maybe increase some security parameters somewhere to make sure that even if there is an attack like this, we're absolutely fine. So like in the case of like AES 256, like Grover's algorithm, you know, does decreases the security by, you know, the square root. So 2 to the 128, AES 128 becomes 64 bits of security, but AES 256 becomes AES 128, which is still a great amount of security, which we can probably not ever envision somebody breaking. So
I'm gonna have to cut you off soon because you're off, and you're up.
I was going to say, even if we come up with like an attack that says we can do it in 2 to the power of 64 time, what's the realistic sort of implementation of that? You know, 2 to the power of 64 times what? You know, how many operations? How much disk space? How much RAM? People say, oh, I found an index calculus attack that means in 2 to the power of 60 I can break this algorithm, but it requires you to cover Mars in hard drives. That's not feasible. So there's not just 2 to the power of whatever as being this sort of security measure. What are the practicalities of that, and like what would it take to implement this?
All right. Any other questions in the audience?
Oh, can I say something
Sure,
about that?
you can,
I
in the
missed how
meantime,
this
but at least
works.
we
Yeah, so I think that was a very good reply. I think maybe it's we should just maybe separate to maybe two terminologies. Like saying something has 80 bits of security maybe should mean that there's an actual attack running in time 2 to the 80, and maybe we should use also the phrase to differentiate sometimes the conservative security estimate is 80 bits, and then maybe to differentiate between those two cases.
You guys have anything you want to share? No?
That makes sense to me. I've also seen people doing some. You can maybe define bits of security in terms of your distribution on future worlds where there are attacks, of different complexities.
So we have a question.
Hey, so following the discussion of whether it's ethical to deploy substandard or maybe not future-proof security, what's your view on upgradable security for snarks or otherwise? Is it realistic to think that we'll have upgradable security and then maybe we don't have to worry about these things too much?
I don't know if that's a question. It's pretty common. It's pretty much a question.
I'd say it's a question. It's fine.
You say question? Okay, it's a question. Keep going. You can answer it.
To me? If it was to me, I'm not sure what you mean by upgradable security.
So you just do some magic and you replace under the hood all of the encryption algorithms or whatever cryptographic primitives you're using, and everything becomes as secure as the latest iteration. There's a few suggestions for that.
Now that sounds a bit like an opinion.
It's
now
not.
you
It's
can come
not.
up.
No,
I think you're up now. You're
no,
up.
I don't think
You're
so.
up.
No, it's really not.
Elad,
Okay.
get over here.
It's just a comment.
No, it's you. We're doing it this way. You're next. Oh wait, you're right. Sorry. Oh no. God, I'm so confused today. We're missing a person. Okay. Oh well, there's 3. Sorry about that. Yeah, I think there was a question.
Yeah, so I'm not sure how to do something like that. Are you maybe referring to these updatable snarks that have come out?
Now that I happen to be up here, I'll tell you exactly which one I mean. So there's a Hungarian guy presenting at ETH-CC, and I forgot his name, and he presented cryptography based on, it wasn't lattices, it was something algebraic, and he claims that you can change the underlying group or whatever it is to upgrade. Again? Algebraic group bundle, exactly. And he claims you can change the underlying group without knowing what the, just as a black box, so you don't need to know the plain text. You can upgrade the security without knowing the plain text, so you can kind of upgrade the security on the fly. And it has this kind of cryptography has some disadvantages as well, but that's a big advantage. And maybe there's another magic. So now that I know there's one magic like this, maybe there's another magic of upgradable security where you start with something that's not known to be quantum vulnerable, but you discover it is, and then you change to a different underlying thing, and then it's not, for example.
Yeah, I didn't know anything about that. That sounds great.
Yeah. Okay. Can we open up the floor to any other questions? Could be about anything we've discussed or actually anything at all.
Anyone is free to change the topic to something else as well.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm afraid. Sorry, I'm very sorry. This falls foul of the rule. That might not be a question, but it's more of an idea I'd like to express, which is.
You could just come right here, actually. We have a seat open.
Oh, no.
Okay, do you want to give him that?
So one potential idea for upgradable security that uses the same crypto system is, well, you can perform, the whole point of a recursive zkSummit construction is you can create cycles of pairing-friendly elliptic curves where the group modulus of one curve is equal to the coordinate modulus of another. But theoretically, you could, inside of the zkSummit circuit, you could do elliptic curve scalar multiplication over curves with different prime fields. It just would require an offensively large number of gates, but theoretically you could do it. So imagine if you had a Pedersen commitment over one elliptic curve, you could create a snark circuit which opens that commitment to a witness and then re-encodes that witness on another elliptic curve. And that would be one, I believe, theoretical way of providing like an upgradable security.
What do you guys think of that?
I think that's a great idea. Like you have like a transition period where everybody upgrades their commitments and proves that it's a commitment to the same plain text or same like note in Zcash case.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very interesting idea.
Cool. Questions in the audience?
Do you have an Orthodox bank account? And if so, despite having one, do you think you can represent the subset of humanity known as the unbanked?
Okay, I think you can come up for that. There's a little opinion in there. There's an angle. There's an angle. Get up.
I think my opinion was that I gave Tux the side eye before I
Do you want to go first? Do you want to answer it? There's a mic there.
Can you actually represent the unbanked?
I don't know about represent. No, I don't have an answer. I don't know if we need to represent. I mean, you want to. I think we shouldn't. Okay, here's the opinion. If I'm on stage, as engineers and scientists and technologists, we should strive to concentrate on engineering and science, and not pretend that our work doesn't have moral implications, but rather work with people that appreciate these moral implications, social scientists and philosophers and community leaders and, and teachers and whatever. And I don't need to be banked or unbanked. I need to know who to ask and who to talk to and be part of a group that has the sensitivity for those issues and listen to them.
All right. Oh, there's another question here.
Is it a question?
It is a question. So with regards to the algebraic group model, it is my understanding that there actually aren't any formal proofs of its security. Like, what is the security of the algebraic group model?
So both the algebraic and generic group model, what they say is what we're proving is your system is secure to against a malicious prover that only does these operations. In the generic group model, these operations are just the regular group operations, just scalar multiplication and addition.
What are they for the algebraic model?
So they're the same. It's this question of adaptivity. Like in the, this always confuses me. What's the difference between the two? Actually, now that I have a little stage pressure, I can't remember the subtle difference between the
Perhaps
two.
I'll deep of a question for a panel.
Nice. Maybe for some context, correct me if I'm wrong, but the point is that you assume that there's a certain types of things that the adversary can do, and it doesn't model stuff like, for example, pairing, right? If you can have an isomorphism between two algebraic structures that's non-obvious, it doesn't capture that. But then you can prove stuff. Like if you assume that there's a very limited instruction set that the adversary can do, you can prove actual security, and that's the claim to fame of this, right? Is that?
Yeah, so that's true, but it's kind of a difference if you give an excuse after you do something or you give a reason in advance. So in the generic group model, you have to say, these are my common reference string elements, these are the operations I'm going to do on them, and whatever I get, I get. In the algebraic group model, you can spit out any element you want, but then you have to show how you can get this element as a linear combination of the elements you had before.
All right, are there any other questions in the room? And again, this can actually go in any direction you want. Doesn't have to be about what we've talked about.
This might be a silly philosophical question, but do you think that zero knowledge proofs and all this science, amazing science we're building here, is just a product of our, huge primate brains, or is something that we just stumble upon and discover? So essentially, is zero knowledge proof science discovered or invented?
That's kind of an opinion? No, is it? No? Okay. It's a question.
Discovered or invented?
I have no idea. Well, I'm going to try and answer anyways, though.
Just whatever you say, I'll argue the opposite.
Okay. Proper panel right here. That's
Wonderful.
what we want. Grab your mic.
I think zero-knowledge cryptography is not, whilst it's derived from pure mathematics, it's not an expression of, it's very much an applied science. It's built around assumptions that we believe to be correct. And I think it's because of those, they are just flat out just basic assumptions that we have no full mathematical proofs over, like the discrete logarithm problem. I think because of that, it's fair enough to say that it's invented, because I don't think there's no natural, how do I put this?
It's not perfect?
It's not like the standard model of particle physics, where by observing reality, you will identify, maybe you won't call them particles, and maybe you won't call them things like forces, but you'll figure out that there are 12 of these indivisible things that we call particles, and they're mediated by these four fundamental forces. Whereas you can elliptic curve cryptography and zero knowledge cryptography, it's far too, in my opinion, saturated with our own desires and assumptions and prejudices for it to be anything pure that could be considered discoverable.
Can you argue against that?
I'll take my time.
Okay.
Yeah, the comment here is for a standard model of particle physics. Sorry, I'm a Russian nuclear scientist. So the standard model of particle physics is based on completely abstract assumptions, which reduce all the current experiments up to the insane precision to 19 free parameters, with those parameters should be defined empirically from experiments and measurements. So there, well, it's invention in the sense that you can write this model abstractly without observations, but it's also discovery because you can get these 19 parameters from the experiment. That is just a remark for standard particle physics because I couldn't not say this.
It's a nice comment, and I think you can come up here. Yeah.
In the meantime, I can say why it was discovered.
Okay.
Zero knowledge proofs were discovered and not invented because there's two options. Either there's some inherent truth to mathematics. Zero knowledge proofs are too amazing and special to exist that we would just invent them. Clearly, there's some inherent property of mathematics as we know it. And then the question is mathematics invented or discovered? And if mathematics was discovered, then zero knowledge proofs are kind of like an amazing thing that was discovered together with it. And if mathematics was invented, then it would be too surprising to find that zero knowledge proofs were invented with it. So they would have had to be discovered.
That's an attempt.
It was better in my mind.
I was initially prepared to take a position of similar zealotry. And doesn't it really come down to the role of ego in the self? Because
All right. Is there any other questions? I think we might have someone out there. There's a couple of hands.
Are we ready to change topics or?
Sure.
Yeah, I wanted to ask just to note that in zero knowledge field, you have people coming from mathematics, from academics, and talking about generic group models and things like that. And you have developers, engineers, and they have to work together very closely. So I would like to someone to discuss the interaction. Like, do the engineers need to learn more mathematics, more skills at proving things? Do mathematicians need to learn to program? How do they communicate? So, yeah, we don't have anyone from Zcash anymore, but probably they have the most experience with that. How does that work?
I think that's a really good question.
Day.
It's a good question.
I guess you got lucky in that aspect. And isn't it a little bit? Doesn't it have a common thread with my question about the banked and the unbanked? Because it goes down to our identities. I don't know. I've recently taken to just calling myself an unlicensed plumber, which is true occasionally. Because if despite the fact that I write in an integrated development environment all day long, most days, when I call myself a developer, what have I done to my humanhood but drawn a box that puts the role of mathematician, to use your example, outside that identity, and then I've lost some sort of perspective, and so when something comes to me that seems as though it has been discovered rather than invented, I think that it's important to celebrate that discovery with the curiosity of a human, of a universal creature, and not, or at least not exclusively, with the role that I might apply to myself as developer or mathematician or whatever hat I happen to have drawn on my resume most recently.
The skills.
Look, consider what we're talking about this entire day. And it's not only zero-knowledge proofs, and it's not even only zero-knowledge concepts, but even zooming out a layer or two from there, aren't we talking really with incredible focus and clarity on notions that are conceptually so new? I mean, certainly within our lifetime, and many of the things that we're discussing are weeks or months old. So the skills, and to the degree to which the skills divide us, I think have to be viewed as something that in the temporal dimension are both incredibly fleeting and always accelerating. So if you feel that you need to cross a line in terms of those skills, one of the things you need to do is learn those skills. I know we can't all get PhDs in mathematics from Cambridge, but the learning these skills and changing who we are and what we think about them is a process that happens with incredible rapidity, and I think that's evidenced by the fact that we're all in the room discussing these things in the first place.
This was a really good answer. Can we just clap at that? That was amazing. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, my answer would be much more trivial. And first, I would like to remind everyone not to invent your own cryptography as the first rule. Other than this, well, everyone knows the wonderful implementations of LeapSnark, which was done by people who, I would say, do science, but they write the code. And for people who want to just try to make something better, faster, or something like this, well, you can start with the code. But really, at some point, you will have to understand. So there is no fine line. It just depends whether you want to be an engineer who is not unbanked, but can understand the needs, or you can be a scientist who can just want to feel how it works with his own hands, like build it from the ground up. Not just a proof system, but, well, that's the implementation, that's the LeapSnark.
I want anyone in the audience, you're allowed to put up your hand. I know we might have an extra answer. So, we actually have somebody with a...
Well, I have a question. So after this brilliant philosophical question, let's go back a little bit to math. Well, to my understanding, and I may be wrong, zero-knowledge proofs, like, for example, snarks or SARKs, are arguments of knowledge and not proofs, in the sense that the soundness is only computational and not perfect. So is it a mistake to call them proofs rather than arguments? Because we're talking about ZKP, not ZKRA, for example.
I think you're good to come up.
It is a question.
It's kind of a question, but...
Maybe as my parting words, can I answer the previous question as my parting words?
But I think he just jumped off. Were you?
No, you're here.
Oh. I think you're still here.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? You wanted to answer the question. Why don't
Stick
you
around and answer the question.
Stick around and answer the question.
So, just one point and it is that the scientific disciplines of today are the engineering disciplines of 30 years from now. So if you think of coders, you had to be a scientist type to write code in the 70s. And by now, any kid, high school kid can write code, really. And you had to be a scientist type to write data science, kind of statistical stuff in the zeros or the 90s, but by now it's getting more and more democratized. And right now, and you had to be a scientist to write cryptography, public key cryptography in the 90s, but by now it's kind of more common. And today, you have to be a scientist to write zero-knowledge proofs or whatever, and in 30 years from now, when there's enough support and enough libraries and so on, you could do, in 50 years, high school kids will be writing zero-knowledge proofs. So, yeah.
Cool.
So it's actually perfect because I was about to ask this question. We are creating tooling right now to allow anyone to create zero-knowledge system, if Snark, zkSummit, Socrates and everything. And we all know that you need to have some kind of quite advanced cryptographic knowledge to actually make secure system. And how do you see this knowledge transmitted and transferred? How do you see normal developers get into the field?
That's a good question.
Well, I think everyone knows the most trivial answer for this too. This is that's why this work is open source. I mean, the whole idea of open source is relying on that there is someone still in there who can actually read what you made, and if you made the mistake and mistake was spotted, this third-party person will fix this mistake but not use it for their own advantage. So this part basically leaves the requirement to knowing how to write the heavy cryptography. If you go into practical implementations, you don't need to know how to write pairing functions. There are 10 people who definitely knew how to write it and they made it before. And the sense of how you implement the actual circuits, well, that's why there are different people who do it. They have different view angle, how they do it in Circum, how they do it in Socrates, how they work with the DHSnark. That is, again, what the open source software is for and what Ethereum Foundation also supports, as far as I know. I think the answer is, let's just keep the spirit for this. And if a person, well, and now it will be my more or less personal opinion because I was working a little bit as a teacher in university. If a person you want to teach is interested, he will learn no matter what you do. He will just do it all by himself. You can give him small hints like 1% push in one direction and that's it. If a person doesn't want, you cannot teach them anything. So this part is, if you can make the material which will push interested parties 1%, that's enough.
Questions? Oh, there's one over there. We haven't heard from you.
Actually, I have a question that I want to kick off. And might be an opinion.
Oh no, what happens if you come up?
In the various scalability solutions that we've talked about today, from Starks to roll up to everything else, there's a lot of proposals to basically say we're going to create a snark or a stark that fills up an entire block with one transaction that represents a bunch of other transactions. Is it ethical to fill up every block with one transaction from one application?
Opinion. So what do we do? Oh wait, do you want to take over my role? Okay. We've never done this.
So you have.
No, you stay. He's the judge.
Need someone to run around the mic.
And I'm gonna give around the mic.
Well, it looks like as one of the people who do this, I have to answer it. No, it's not. The problem is, even while all of us give a number, some huge number, we can aggregate a lot of transactions for a huge price, like one time lump sum price. At the point, with some concrete numbers, let's say it's 500 or 1,000 transactions per second, you consume the entire Ethereum capacity of every block, like every block all the time. well, let's first get to the point where the 1,000 is needed. There is still no killer application for blockchains, there is no killer application for scaling solutions. We need someone else, not to just make the snarks or scalings or something like this. We need someone to make this application. So it's not only zero knowledge which is important, it's just the general creativity.
MakerDAO is a killer application for DAI stablecoin, I think, is the first good killer application.
As soon as I can pay for a coffee in the morning with MakerDAO, I will agree.
We are dangerously close to devolving into CryptoKitties up here. I want to just point that out. So let's see. What do the ethics of including a single transaction only in a block consist of? It seems to me that essentially the question is whose interests are excluded from that block and whose interests are included in that block. In the case of rollup, assuming the proof is fair and accurate, we are reflecting the interests of both people whose Merkle proof is being compressed in that block, as well as people who want not to need to store the entire Merkle tree in that block, whose interests are being excluded. Well, we have everybody else that wanted to get a transaction into that block. So rather than give an answer, I think I'll just sort of observe that appears to be the ethical dilemma, and someone correct me if I have missed a part of it.
We have another question over here.
Yeah, hey, what is the most interesting application of zero knowledge for you?
Well, I give a lot of personal opinions today. Kosti is still here. Kosti, please stand up. This is a guy who made the game using zero knowledge in Berlin and presented it on stage as the main prize. So I believe in zero knowledge gaming. Well, even maybe it sounds artificial, but well, please someone just design a game which will be interesting. We've seen the CryptoKitties, we've seen that those are interesting. Please just someone, do you want to answer? No. You just needed to stand up so everyone, the person who did kind of the killer feature for zero knowledge. You make something funny. Just zero knowledge is area so involved. Everyone works in scaling. Let's solve the rollable problem. Let's use the MakerDAO for unbanked with low transaction fees and all this. Yeah, that's good. Yes, that's good. But at some point, you need to just think about people who don't care about it and make the killer application. Or you can make a poker with zero knowledge too. With probable shuffles and everything, so yeah, can make more and more ideas.
There's another question over here.
This will maybe be a short one or a long one. I'd be very interested in hearing what a zkStark or snark or sark would sound like interpreted on the flute.
Yeah.
You could say a snark or a snark. You tell me which one. Your creative preference. Both.
I think I know the answer to that.
He does? Why? What is it?
It's like it's what I like.
Yeah.
Snark and then stark.
One happens on one flute, the other clearly happens.
Oh yeah. The start group is longer, so make a longer one.
Yeah, well, I didn't.
No, just make it start.
Maybe start longer part. I don't know what a snark or a stark will sound like on the flute, but I'm happy to play the flute for you for a moment. I'll leave it to you to figure out whether that was a snark.
Ooh, let's give it a hand. Do you still have a question?
Yeah. It's actually a comment. So, just with okay. Just with respect to the conversation about is it ethical or whatever, because I thought that was a very interesting question. I mean, I think the answer is the same for all situations where you have some finite resource. like a quote unquote public bulletin board or whatever that people like to think about blockchains, that you use a market to determine the allocation of that resource. No, it's not ethical, of course. It goes to the person who has the most money. So, anyway. Oh, right. People who don't have money don't need things.
I mean, it's also giving an unfair advantage to the people who have the technological might to introduce their mega transactions.
The real question then is there anything distinct about this particular ethical dilemma and the way that it introduces market effects and technological effects that is it distinct from anything else that you might ask about the blockchain? Like, you know, like if this were actually the ethical dilemma, in other words, if it boiled all the way down to, well, if the person with the most money wins or the person with the best technology wins, do we have any real authority to distinguish that ethical dilemma from any other question that you can ask about blockchain tech at all? I'm inclined to say that the answer has to be yes, but if we can't identify how, then perhaps that's a problem.
So I have a question. I guess that might be a comment. I don't know. However, so a while ago, I was on a podcast. This was a long time ago, but somebody asked a question of me that really changed my views on a lot of things, and it was, we are doing so much technological innovation, and at the same time, we're leaving behind those who don't have the privilege of using our technology. What role do the things that we build actually play in the lives of the unprivileged? Does it play a role at all?
I think you're actually replacing him now, right?
Does that mean that I get to give it a go before I leave?
Yeah, I think he's done.
No, I think I'm out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because we had skipped one.
We're just
Oh,
trading a
okay.
new cipher guy for new stuff. Yeah, as, you know.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so this is my parting thing, right? So I'll try to play it sort of purely political and not go into the metaphysics of who or what the identity is for people who don't seem to directly benefit. It seems, the hope is, and this is what we've been talking about since the Bitcoin white paper, that I think here it is. And again, this is the very simple political thing. So, you know, if it is true, and it's a big if, that the authority structures of the geopolitical configuration of today are subject to deprecation by dint of losing their stranglehold on the printing press of the economy. And obviously, as we see blockchain grow, we notice that it's not merely the printing press of the economy, but of a number of different computational and economic and social ideas. Then we hope that absent that stranglehold, the governments of the world will not be able to wage endless war, and therefore that the victims of endless war who have surprising and coincidental overlap with those who don't have the privilege of this technology, we hope will be in a better position. So as we build, one of the imperatives has to be to end endless war.
Should we give another little clap? Does anyone else have some questions?
I do not want to go on stage, but I do have an opinion. So, I love to dream up products, and I've built a couple of companies, and I spent the entire 2018 getting into blockchain. Like, I took a year off almost to just do that. So I was extremely intrigued and fascinated. And now they say when you are the smartest guy in the room, you're in the wrong room. Now today I am in the wrong room, but because of the opposite, I feel like the dumbest person here in the room because I don't understand the mathematics behind the proofs themselves. But what I do get out of this is an enormous amount of inspiration and ideas for future products that deliver value to our society. And what we observe in the social media and in politics strangely, which goes south, strangely coincides with the technology that you guys are working on, and that enables a better future. So I think, yes, it does matter.
Well, I wanted to continue on a previous question, but also this one is great to include. In general, in the course of human development, and it's especially well seen in the United States, there is always a cycle that kind of the new money eats the old money, and this is how the innovation works. There are a lot of, let's say, like entities or families, or however you call it, with a huge amount of resources accumulated historically, but still the innovation allows new people to get on stage and get the influence in principle. If this influence would be zero from a side of the public blockchains, it would be very much unlikely that any government would want to introduce either restrictions or any regulation on it. Usually the government makes those if it feels threatened. So I say there is already a good progress in this, but it's far from completeness.
I guess I'm not sure exactly how it factored into the second thing you said, but I would strongly object to the claim that, quote unquote, that people who made money in the past are sort of pushed out or whatever by people who make money in the future. That's just an empirical not true. I mean, if you think that's true, go meet someone whose last name is Rockefeller and ask them if they no, I'm serious. Ask them how much they had to work in their life. Or that's an extreme example, obviously, but of course this is true in less extreme examples.
I want to second that a lot. But another point too is that you say we're building a better future, but the question ultimately is for who? If you're talking about the first world capitalist society that we all live in, then sure, our lives are going to be practically, changed by the technology we're building now. But for a person in Kenya who doesn't have access to some of the technology we have, this is a huge privilege. And are we leaving them behind and not going to bring this to them? And how can we benefit their society and not just, white privileged, Western society?
Do we have time? We are kind of out of time. I think maybe we can ask the room. Do you guys want to do another 5 minutes? Or do you want to wrap up? Yeah? Okay, I think we're going to keep going. 5 more minutes. There's some very good points here.
It's not a question either, it's a point based on, I'm going to go along with Alex. Just very briefly. About where you're right about Rockefeller, the truth is in the US, in the last 40 years, a number of the top 100 most richest men are people who are self-made men. And it's true that there are some of them who were born rich and stay rich. But actually in the US, where market kind of work, it's much more pregnant than what we have in Europe, where in Florida, in Florence, for the last 600 years, it's still the same family. So the question is, and also to go back to the Kenyan example, technology has helped a lot there. M-Pesa is one of the most exemplary success in mobile banking, and it's Kenyan-based. It's African. It's based in Kenya, and the tech there is bringing a new opportunity, which tends to go along with what Alex was saying.
But can I say something? So first of all, I think that I believe that there are problems with inheritance and wealth inequality in Europe. There are also problems in America, and in fact they're worse. And I think probably this example that you gave, there are tech billionaires now. Okay, well, yeah, there's 200 people maybe who now were able to make money. You know how many people live in America? It's like 300 something million. So this is like a form of, this is a kind of mythical, myth of lotteryism that, there's this literally 1 in a million roughly chance of making money, but
we may be veering a little bit off topic.
Okay. And anyway,
I just want to say, okay. I don't know what to say to that. I had an opinion, but
bring it back.
I like this guy's politics.
Okay, should we just question?
Yeah. Let's final question.
Zero knowledge related. It's a rule. Do you have one?
What hash function we have to use inside the zero knowledge? I'm sorry for the change, but she asked me a zero knowledge concrete.
Which hash function should we use inside zero knowledge proofs?
I think probably everyone knows it's Sean. It's Dara and Sean's Dara Hopwood and Sean's Peterson hash function. Except not with the windowing optimization that they do, because it's an anti-optimization, actually. I can tell you offline.
I would say the Peterson hash functions are probably your most efficient bet right now, unless you're looking for quantum security, in which case we have yet to see a really cool lattice-based zero-knowledge proof that just sweeps the floor of performance that we've never seen yet. But of course, there's some downsides to it. But in that case, maybe something lattice-based, based off of learning with errors, would be really, really cool.
I will mix quantum security.
Turn it on.
I will mix a quantum security and concrete implementations. Peterson hash is not quantum secure, no matter whether it's inside of a snark or a stark, or whether it's external function, external proof system is quantum secure. So I would say make something which was more or less analyzed and has the least number of constraints. I really like hash function by Dmitry Haratovich which was presented at the DevCon. And if someone can do the proper analysis, or maybe just break it, so I don't think that it should be usable in the future, please do this.
What was it?
It was a hash function which I don't think it has a proper name. It was presented by Dmitry Haratovich in a DevCon 4 in the last year. Which basically has something like 68 break-even constraint system constraints per round, and per full hash functions should tend to less than 500.
So I want to briefly also answer that. It depends what you need from the hash function. If you just need what's called collision resistance, then definitely Pedersen. If you need something that looks random looking, like you're kind of a random oracle, then you still need to use the heavier SHA-256 or Blake 2.
But Blake 2 is 20% better, so use that.
Yeah.
All right, so Peterson or Blake 2. That's the final answer. Or the new experimental one if you can prove it safe.
Okay, a question.
Break it first. Break it so we don't think about it.
Can I ask a question of the audience? ETH 2.0, when the fuck can we switch to SHA-3 instead of Ketchak 256? Thank you.
I actually know the answers to that. So they plan on switching to something slower, but they stuck with Ketchak because they don't want to depend on the different properties of Blake 2. The original design was Blake 2. They shifted back. They want to shift to something quantum secure in the future. That's reasoning.
So I think that we have gone way over time, but we've had a wonderful session with everybody. I want to say thank you to all of the panelists, and thank you guys for playing this kind of awesome game with us just now. We try to do this every time. I hope you enjoyed it and got something out of it. Thanks, everyone. And so I guess I can say, Fredrik, do you want to just stay here for 1 sec? Because this kind of concludes the summit. Thank you all for coming. This was the 3rd edition here. I think it was probably the most zero-knowledge-y one, the most focused one. And we have drinks for about 2 hours, right?
Enjoy.
So enjoy.
Thank you very much.
Keep these conversations going.
Thank you.